Hey guys, so it's Miss Susie. I will be reading a book to you. It is going to be Milo and Jazz Mysteries, The Case of the Poison Pig. So let me just go over the vocabulary words that I want you to pay attention to as we read the book. And I want you to define the vocabulary words in Class Dojo and post it under your portfolio. The vocabulary words will also be posted in the description as well, so you could always use that as a reference. And the link for the website that I'm using to read the book, it will also be posted in the description. So the vocabulary words are training, dinosaurs, squirming, scowling, grimly, pattern, suspects, witnesses, experts, and stakeouts. So I'm going to go ahead and minimize myself a little bit lower, and yeah, now you should be able to see my screen. So I will be asking questions throughout the book, and I just want you to post them in your portfolio under Class Dojo, the answers to the questions. The questions should also be posted in the description as well. So, Milo and Jazz Mysteries, The Case of the Poison Pig. Chapter 1. Milo stared up at the classroom clock. How come the last few minutes of the school day always felt like hours, but recess seemed to zip by in 3 seconds? A flash of purple caught his eye. He turned. It was a purple-flowered clog. The clog was on the foot of his friend Jazz. She was using it to kick a folded note across the floor between their desks. He reached for her with his sneaker. Almost. Milo! Uh-oh. Miss Allie, their teacher, held out her hand. All right, let's have that note. Slowly he got up. Someone giggled. Miss Allie tapped her foot as Milo walked to the front of the room. He handed her the paper. She unfolded it. Her eyebrows scrunched. She turned it over and looked at the back, then at the front again. It's blank. She looked at Milo. Why would someone pass you a blank sheet of paper? He shrugged. Maybe they forgot to write a note. Everyone in the class was giggling now. Frowning, Miss Allie gave him the paper and he went back to his seat. While Miss Allie called for quiet, Milo pulled out his invisible ink. Using an open book as a shield, he shone the paper's special light on Jazz's notes. That's actually a really, interesting and smart way to pass notes, so you don't get in trouble. What do you think is on the note? He clicked off the light and glanced at Jazz. A surprise! Could it be a new case? Milo and Jazz were detectives in training. They got lessons in the mail from world-famous Private Eye Dash, Marlowe. With a little help from Dash, they solved real-life mysteries. When the bell rang, Jazz met Milo in the hall. Phew, she said. I sure am glad you gave me that invisible ink pen. So what do you guys think the surprise is that Jazz wants to tell Milo? Me too. So what's the surprise? She smiled. You'll see. Give me a hint, he said as they walked toward his brother Ethan's kindergarten room. Where is it? At my house. Is it Dylan? He asked. Did he lose something again? Dylan was Jazz's teenage brother. Not long ago, his lucky socks had disappeared, and they had tracked them down. Jazz said, I think he's lost his mind. Wait until you see the car he bought. That's the surprise? No, the surprise is something good. They picked Ethan up and headed home. Ethan skipped ahead, hands in his jacket pockets, singing a dinosaur song. He was crazy about dinosaurs. Dig, 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 dig up the dinosaurs. How about another hint? Milo asked Jazz. It starts with P, she said. A surprise starting with P. Party? Nope. He thought again. Popcorn? Nope. Pirate ship? Jazz gave him a look. Candy, yelled Ethan. Huh? Candy doesn't start with P, Milo said. So, what other words can you think of that begin with a P that could possibly be the surprise? Look! His brother waved a plastic Easter egg. Something rattled inside. Candy. Can I have some? Milo asked. Quickly, Ethan shoved the egg back in his pocket. I'm saving it. Milo rolled his eyes. He'd gobbled everything out of his own Easter basket except the plastic grass. But Ethan let himself eat just one piece a day. One single jelly bean. One little cream-filled egg. One pink and green foiled wrapped piece of chocolate. At this rate, he'd have Easter candy until Halloween. Jazz's house looked just the same as usual, at least from the outside. So where's the surprise? Milo asked as they walked up the steps. You'll see. She opened the door. Zoom! A black and white blur shot out. Before he knew what was happening, it dashed between his legs and hurtled off the porch. Catch her, Jazz yelled. Milo ran one way, Jazz ran the other. When the animal stopped for a second, they both dove. Bonk! Ouch! Jazz rubbed her head. Did you get her? No, did you? I got her, Ethan said. Milo looked up at the tiny, squirming animal cradled in his brother's arms. Was it a puppy? No. A kitten? No. Holy cow, he said. It's a pig! Chapter 2. This is our new pet, Jazz said. Her name is Eugenia. Ethan stared at the tiny pig. Huge what? Eugenia, Jazz repeated more slowly. Isn't she cute? Milo stared too. I thought pigs were pink. Not all of them, Jazz said. Round-eyed Ethan whispered. She's so little. She's just a baby, and she's a pot-bellied pig. They're extra small. Jazz held out her hands, but Ethan squeezed the piglet tighter. Can I hold her one more minute, please? Okay, but don't squish her, Jazz said. And don't let her go. This morning she made a mess of Miss Budge's prize petunias. She pointed in the yard next door. A lady was digging up a bed of trampled flowers. She did not look happy. Your teeny little piglet did all that? Milo asked. Jazz nodded glumly. Now Mom says I have to pay Mrs. Budge back by helping her in her garden, and she's such a grouch. How come you didn't tie the pig up? We did, but she got loose somehow. My dad calls her Teeny Houdini. The door opened. Jazz's older sister Vanessa rushed out. She spotted the piglet. Queenie, she said. How did you get out again? Queenie? Milo glanced at Jazz. I thought you said her name was Eugenia. It is, she said. Is not, Vanessa said, fists on hips. Is too. Rack-a-cack-cack-cack-cack. A loud noise from the garage drowned out the two girls. It sounded like a lawnmower, choking on a weed whacker. Their older brother Dylan strolled out, wiping oily hands on his jeans. That car sounds even worse than it looks, Jazz said. Oh yeah? Said Dylan. See if I drive you anywhere. He looked down at Ethan and the pig playing in the grass. Hey, Spike, made a new friend? Spike? How many names does this pig have? Milo asked. Dylan laughed. 4 so far. 1 for each of us kids. Chris calls her Pegasus. 1 piglet with 4 names? Isn't that a little confusing, Milo said. Dad gave us a week to decide, Jazz explained. If we can't all agree on a name by them, then he'll pick one himself. Vanessa shuddered. Last time he did that, we ended up with a goldfish called Glub. Why don't you just agree to Eugenia then? Jazz said. Why don't you agree to Queenie? Eugenia doesn't want a silly name like Queenie, Jazz said. Do ya, Eugenia? Vanessa marched off in a huff. Want to check out my wheels? Dylan asked Milo. Sure, he said. Jazz made a face, but she followed them to the garage. Milo's jaw dropped. Wow! One of the car doors hung open in a funny way. The hood was propped up with a stick, and rusty parts lay scattered on a bench. Something sticky dripped into a spreading puddle on the floor. Dylan beamed. Like it? It's Milo wasn't sure what to say. That's some car. It'll be even better once it's all fixed up. Dylan gave the car a friendly pat, and a hubcap fell off. Milo smiled politely, then he and Jazz made for the door. So, do you guys remember the 4 names the piglet has from each child? Go ahead and type that in or write it down and post in your portfolio. And also, what do you guys think of Dylan's new car too? It looks like there's a lot of issues and that he needs to fix a lot of things. See what I mean? Jazz said. My brother is as nutty as a bag of trail mix. They came around the corner of the house and saw Ethan still playing with the pig. Then Jazz stopped short. Oh no, it's Gordy Fletcher. Chapter 3. Gordy Fletcher was in their class at school. He was always doing things like sticking kiss me signs on kids' backs or asking them if they had studied for the test when there wasn't a test that day. Gordy was standing by his scooter. A big white plastic thing with tubes sticking out was slung across his back. He was eyeing the piglet. What is that? Gordy asked. It's huge, Ethan said. Gordy stared at the pig. Doesn't look too huge to me. Ethan pointed at the tubby thing on Gordy's back. What's that? Is it an alien space blaster? Gordy smirked. You got it. He slung it off and aimed it at the piglet. Freeze, or you're bacon bits. He laughed. Jazz stormed up. Gordy Fletcher, you leave my pig alone. Scowling, Gordy slung the blaster on his back again. Then suddenly he grinned. Hey, that was a great trick, passing that blank note in class today, he said. I want to shake your hand. Gordy stuck his hand out, and Milo shook it. Bzzz. Milo jumped back, yanking his hand away. Doubled over laughing, Gordy showed the buzzer hidden in his palm. Jazz glared at him. Why don't you pick on someone your own age, like a 2-year-old? Oh, come on, can't you take a joke? Still laughing, Gordy rode off on his scooter. Are you okay? Jazz asked Milo. He nodded. Startled me, that's all. Be glad he doesn't live on your street. You know how many times he's put fake dog poop on our lawn? She sighed. Ethan refused to leave the piglet, so Milo called home and asked if they could stay a while. Then he and Jazz made a snack and started on their homework. Let's do this in invisible ink, he said. Then Miss Allie can't see if it's wrong. And then she'll give us a 0, Jazz said. Good point. Ethan tore in behind Eugenia, Queenie, Spike, Pegasus. They chased each other in circles around the kitchen table. Suddenly the piglet stopped. A strange noise came from the back of her throat. E. Jazz scooped her up. What's wrong, Eugenia? I think she's choking, Jazz said. Maybe we should do the Heimlich on her, said Milo. How do you do that? I'm not sure exactly. I think you hug the person hard around the waist. Do piglets have waists? Blah! They stared at the puddle of pig puke. Well, Jazz said she isn't choking. Milo groaned. She threw up all my homework. Jazz set the piglet on the floor. Ethan knelt down and patted her. Do you feel better now, Huge? The pig threw up again. Milo figured that meant no. We'd better take her to the vet, Jazz said. She's just a baby, after all. Miss Allie is never going to believe a pig puked on my homework, Milo said. Maybe the vet can write you an excuse. Ethan insisted on coming along to the vet's office, too. She's not our pet, Milo said. But I love her. You just met her. I don't care. I love her more than Easter candy, more than Grandma Judy, more than dinosaurs." Ethan hugged the pig tightly. "Careful," Jazz warned. "You'll make her puke again." "He's going to make me puke," Milo said. The vet's waiting room was full of animals: an orange kitten, 2 hamsters, a fat little puppy, and a big, drooly dog, but no other pigs. When their turn came, Dr. So said, "Well now, and who is this?" "Eugenia." Jazz smiled as the vet scribbled the name on his chart. While they told him what had happened, Dr. So picked up the piglet and felt her all over. He peered in her eyes and ears and down her throat. Looks pretty healthy. So why did she throw up?" Jazz asked. Dr. So looked thoughtful. "I can't be sure," he said, "but it looks to me like a case of poisoning." So do you remember where Jazz and Milo took the piglet? And do you guys remember what animals were in the vet office? Chapter 4. Poisoning? Jazz gasped. "But she's only a piglet. Who would do an awful thing like that?" Milo pictured a gloved hand tapping a drop of sickly green liquid into a bowl of pig chow. Could this be their next case? Dr. So laughed. "I wasn't suggesting foul play, that she was poisoned on purpose, but I'm sure it was an accident." He picked up a leaflet and gave it to Jazz. "A lot of ordinary household items can be dangerous for pets." Milo read over Jazz's shoulder. "Pigs love to explore. They also love to eat. But sometimes they eat things that aren't good for them." Common pig poisons include salt in large amounts, pennies, coffee, tea, and chocolate, household cleaners, soap, sunblock, aspirin and other pain medicines, automobile coolant, antifreeze, oleander, and other poisonous plants. Pig-proof your house and yard, and make sure these items are placed out of reach of your pet pig. Antifreeze, Milo thought of the sticky puddle under Dylan's car. He asked Jazz, "Has Eugenia been in the garage?" Jazz shrugged. "I don't think so, unless she got in there while we were at school." Dr. So checked his watch. Whatever she ate, it was within the last few hours. He set the piglet on the floor. She trotted around, snuffling curiously. "At any rate, she seems fine now. If you go home and do some pig-proofing, you shouldn't have any more troubles." When they got back, Jazz tied the pig's leash to the porch. "You stay here while we make the house safe for you." She glanced next door. Mrs. Budge was still hard at work in her torn-up garden. "And please be good." "I'll take care of her," Ethan promised, holding her to his cheek. "Right, Eugenia," Jazz corrected. Ethan didn't seem to notice. They went through the house room by room. Every time they found an item from the list, they moved it way up high where the pig couldn't reach. Milo had just climbed up on the toilet to put the soap on a high shelf when Dylan walked in. He was covered in grease. "Whoa, I need that soap." Dylan scrubbed. Jazz explained about the pig-proofing and read him the list of poisons. "Antifreeze, huh?" Dylan said. "I saw something leaking from your car," said Milo. "That's just water from the radiator." Dylan paused. "Well, a little engine oil, and maybe some brake fluid, but I'll clean it up anyway. Don't want Spike getting sick." "Eugenia," Jazz said. "Whatever." They heard the front door slam. A moment later, Ethan rushed in. "Milo, Jazz, the space alien boy is back, and he's shooting at Huge." So, do you guys remember why Jazz and Milo were cleaning up the house and pig-proofing the house? Do you guys remember some of the items that were on the list? Chapter 5. Gordy Fletcher stood on the sidewalk, holding his blaster. The piglet dashed back and forth at the end of her leash, squealing. As they rushed toward him, Gordy took aim. "Stop!" Milo yelled. Gordy put his mouth up to one of the plastic tubes. His cheeks puffed out, and something small and white shot past the piglet's ear. Jazz ran up and wrenched the weapon out of Gordy's hands. "Hey, give that back," he yelled. "You'll get it up your nose if you shoot at my pig again." "But she likes it," Gordy protested. "Right, Bacon Bits?" Jazz glared at him. "She's eaten 6 already." Gordy laughed. "What a pig. Get it? A pig?" "6 what?" Milo asked. "Marshmallows." Milo stared at the white plastic tubes. "That thing shoots marshmallows?" Gordy nodded. "I made it myself." "Wow, a homemade marshmallow shooter. Awesome." Frowning, Jazz handed it back to Gordy. She shouldn't be eating all those marshmallows. They're only mini marshmallows." "Well, she's a mini pig," Jazz said. 6 of those for her is like 60 for us." Milo wondered how he'd feel if he ate 60 marshmallows. Probably not so good. "Wait a minute. You were here before," he said to Gordy. "When you buzzed my hand." Gordy looked nervous. "Yeah, so?" Milo turned to Jazz. "Remember, he was in the yard when we came out of the garage. He had the shooter then, too. What if she ate some marshmallows and—" Jazz broke in, "and then got sick?" She pointed at Gordy. You did it! You poisoned Eugenia!" "What?" Gordy backed away. "Pig poisoner! You're crazy! I didn't do anything!" Gordy shot a marshmallow at Jazz. It fell short. He turned and ran. She hollowed after him. "And you're a bad shot, too!" Milo stared at her. Was this Jazz? Logical, calm, let's not jump to conclusions Jazz? "We don't know if Gordy gave her marshmallows before," he pointed out. "When we came out of the garage, it looked like he had just shown up." Jazz shook her head stubbornly. "Didn't you see how scared he looked?" "I'd look scared too if someone screamed pig poisoner at me," he said. "Anyway, marshmallows aren't even on the list of poisons. Maybe they're not bad for pigs." "Of course they're bad for pigs," Jazz said. "They're bad for everybody. You know what's in them?" "Sugar? Worse than that. Vanessa told me Dylan told her that they make them with ground up hooves and bones from cows and pigs." What do you guys think of that? Do you believe that that is true? Pigs, you mean? Jazz nodded. Eugenia's a cannibal. Yuck, no wonder she threw up. He sure wouldn't want to eat anything made from people feed. He glanced over at the piglet. Ethan had let her off her leash, and they were chasing each other around. Mrs. Budge looked on sourly from the yard next door. "Ethan," Milo called, "did you see Gordy shooting marshmallows before?" Ethan stopped and stared at him. "Sure, then Jazz took his blaster away." Milo shook his head. "I mean before, the last time he was here." "That was the last time he was here," Ethan insisted. "No, I mean, oh, forget it. Little kids were hopeless." Maybe Mrs. Budge saw something," Jazz suggested. "You could ask her." "You ask her. She's your neighbor." "But she's mad at me about Eugenia." Milo shot a glance at Mrs. Budge. She didn't look like she was in the mood to chat, especially not about a pig, but there was no one else to ask. He crossed the driveway. "Excuse me?" Mrs. Budge's head snapped up. He gulped. "Yes, what is it?" she said. Nice flowers," he blurted out. She looked at her wrecked flower bed, then stared at him. "I mean, they must have been nice," grimly she said. "They were." Jazz came over. "Mrs. Budge, I'm really sorry about what Eugenia did. She doesn't know any better. It won't happen again," she smiled hopefully. Mrs. Budge didn't smile back. "No," she said firmly, "it won't." As they walked away, she mumbled something else. Milo couldn't be certain, but it sounded like "I'm going to make good and sure of that." So how many marshmallows did the piglet eat? Chapter 6. Saturday morning, Milo was polishing off his 3rd stack of pancakes when the mail arrived. "Something for you," his dad said. He was holding out a plain brown envelope with DM in the upper left-hand corner. "Dash Marlowe, a new detective lesson." Milo tore the envelope open, getting it sticky with syrup, and unfolded the letter inside. Dash Marlowe, Secrets of a Super Sleuth. Look for a pattern. Ever wonder why detectives are called private eyes? Because they see things other people don't. Patterns. Find the pattern in the clues you gather, and you'll solve your case. One day, the owner of the ritziest department store in Paris called. He was beside himself with worry. 3 days earlier, a woman had walked out of his store carrying a suitcase. Suspicious, the guard stopped her. After all, who brings a suitcase to go shopping? She must be stealing something big, they figured. A dozen pairs of designer shoes, or their entire stock of silver spoons. But when they opened the suitcase, it was empty. The next day, the guards spotted the same woman walking out with an even bigger suitcase. They stopped her again and opened up the suitcase. Empty. The third day, the suitcase was so big the woman could hardly carry it. This time, the guards were determined to find out what she was stealing. They examined the suitcase from top to bottom, searching for a secret hiding place, but they found nothing. Finally, they had to let her go. That was when they sent for me, world-famous Private Eye, Marlowe. I listened as the owner, nearly weeping, told me the whole story. Then I told him what the woman was stealing. Suitcases. There was more, but Milo wanted to share it with his partner. Carrying his plate to the sink, he said, I'm going over to Jazz's, okay? I want to go too, Ethan said. Milo sighed. Can't you play with your own friends for once? Huge is my friend. I love her more than Gran. Okay, fine, you can come, Milo said quickly. He didn't think his mom would be too pleased to hear Ethan compare their grandma to a pig, especially since he preferred the pig. When they got to Jazz's house, they found Eugenia, Queenie, Spike, Pegasus, tied to the front porch. She seemed pretty perky for a cannibal. Ethan ran to her and scooped her up, cooing, Who's the nicest piggy in the whole wide world? Do you want some kisses? He rubbed his nose against her little snout. Yuck. Milo. It was Jazz's voice. Milo turned, but he didn't see anyone. An arm waved from behind a shrub in Mrs. Budge's yard. Over here. Chapter 7. Milo ran over. How come you're hiding? Are you spying on someone? Maybe Jazz had spotted Mrs. Budge doing something suspicious. I'm not hiding, Jazz said. I'm pruning. She stood up. Remember, I have to pay back Mrs. Budge for what Eugenia did to her garden. He made a face. Oh, yeah. It's not so bad, actually. Mrs. Budge has been telling me all kinds of neat stuff about plants. She really knows a lot. While Jazz worked, Milo read the new lesson from Marlowe out loud. After the story about patterns, Dash wrote about how to gather evidence by talking to people who might know something about the case. Suspects, witnesses, or experts. Of course, people might not tell you the whole story. They might leave something out, not realizing it's important. They might forget. They might even lie. Your task is to fill in the blanks, to figure out what really happened without having to be told. Milo stopped reading. Mrs. Budge was coming toward them. She was carrying a tray of lemonade and cookies, and she was smiling. While they ate, she inspected the shrub that Jazz had pruned. You did a lovely job on this oleander bush, Jasmine. You have a real green thumb. Oleander. Why did that sound so familiar? Why does that word sound so familiar to Milo? Where did you see that word before? I really am sorry about your flowers, Jazz told her again. I'll keep working as long as you want me to, and I won't let Eugenia. Oh, you've done enough, Mrs. Budge said. As for your pig, well, I don't think that will be a problem very much longer. Her smile grew wider. Milo stared at Mrs. Budge. What did she mean? He tried to catch Jazz's eye, but she was looking in a different direction. Oh no, not him again. Jazz said. Gordy Fletcher stood on the sidewalk, watching Ethan try to teach the piglet to roll over. When he saw Jazz headed toward him, Gordy backed away. I didn't touch old bacon bits, okay? Stop calling her that, Jazz yelled. Why, you called me a pig poisoner. Gordy had a point there. Milo glanced at the pig, then at Jazz. Did she get sick at all again last night, after the marshmallows? No, she admitted, but... See, Gordy said, so take it back. Hands on hips, Jazz stared at him. Finally she said, okay, you're not the one who poisoned her, maybe. For a second, Gordy looked annoyed. Then he grinned. Good enough for me. No hard feelings. Reaching in his jacket, he pulled out a can. I'll even let you have some of my jelly beans. Jazz rolled her eyes. What's inside? A snake that jumps out at you? Geez, I was only trying to be nice. Gordy peeled the lid open. See? Milo peeked inside. Jelly beans. Wow, Gordy really was just being nice. Grabbed a handful and tossed them into his mouth. Yick! Choking and sputtering, he spit them out. What is that? Gordy was laughing too hard to answer. Finally he wheezed. I painted them with the bad-tasting stuff my sister puts on her nails to keep from biting them. Pretty nasty, huh? Just then Ethan ran up, holding the piglet. He was just acting funny. Eh, eh, eh. Milo and Jazz stared at each other in alarm. Not again. Gordy's grin vanished. Is she okay? Eh, eh, eh. Hey, I think she's choking. Taking the piglet from Ethan, Gordy peered into her mouth. Milo said, I wouldn't. Bleh! Chapter 8. Look on the bright side, Milo said. Your pig threw up on Gordy Fletcher. Jazz frowned. It's not funny. How did Eugenia get sick again? We pig-proofed the entire house. Milo thought. Has she been anywhere else this morning? Outside, but she was with Ethan. Maybe he fed her something, Milo said. We should talk to him. They found his brother curled up on the living room couch with the piglet. Shh! Ethan put his finger to his lips. She's sleeping. Ethan, Jazz said, you didn't give Eugenia anything today, did you? Anything that isn't good for her. Ethan shook his head. Just kisses. Milo sighed. This isn't what we mean. He wished Ethan would go back to dinosaurs. Ethan's dinosaur thing was annoying, but at least it didn't make him want to gag. Did you see anybody else feeding her anything? Jazz asked. Not Gordy Fletcher. She looked at Milo. He shrugged. As they went back to the kitchen, he thought about what Dr. So had said. What if it wasn't an accident after all? What if it was foul play? Does Eugenia have any enemies? Jazz looked at him. Milo, she's a pig. What about Mrs. Budge? He asked. Didn't you hear her? She said the pig wouldn't be a problem much longer. Maybe she's the one who's trying to, he lowered his voice, do her in. Jazz frowned, then shook her head. You saw how nice she was to us today. She even made us cookies. Milo stared at her. Those cookies. Had they tasted funny? Suddenly he didn't feel so good. What's wrong? Jazz said. You look like Glub the time his goldfish bowl tipped over. My stomach hurts. The cookies. Next time don't eat so many. I feel fine, she went on. How about Gordy? Ethan said Gordy didn't give her anything. Jazz raised an eyebrow. He said he didn't see Gordy give her anything. That's different. Milo thought about it. Gordy was, well, he was Gordy, but he wouldn't poison a pet pig, would he? Those jelly beans, Jazz said. They just tasted horrible. The nail stuff isn't poisonous, Milo told her. That doesn't mean it's okay for Eugenia. There were things on that list of pig poisons that were fine for people. Milo got out his detective notebook. He wrote suspects, Gordy and Mrs. Budge. Who do you think is poisoning the pig? And why do you think they're doing it? Milo looked at the list. Gordy, Mrs. Budge. Something was bugging him. Something Mrs. Budge had said. Oleander, he exclaimed. What? Mrs. Budge has oleander in her yard, and it was on the list of poisons. Jazz's eyes widened. You mean Eugenia might have eaten some leaves? She frowned, but she only got into Mrs. Budge's yard once, so the second time she got sick she couldn't have been eating oleander. Unless Mrs. Budge fed it to her. Jazz frowned again. Mrs. Budge might be a little grouchy sometimes, but a pig poisoner? She shook her head. I say it was Gordy and the jelly beans. Well, I say it was Mrs. Budge. They stared at each other. Jazz sighed. If only we'd caught him in the act. Or her, Milo added. He tried to think. What would Dash do? Slowly, he said. Maybe it's not too late. What do you mean? It's happened twice. It could happen again, he smiled. But this time we'll be ready. Chapter 9. Hippity, hoppity, hippity, hoppity. Behind the bushes, a chocolate bunny hopped onto Milo's knee. He made a grab for it, but it hopped away. Come on, Ethan, he whispered. Let me have a bite of that bunny. I'm starving. Hippity, I can't, I'm saving it. One ear, the tail, hoppity. Ethan shook his head. Milo pulled his notebook from his pocket. Rule number 1 for stakeouts, he wrote. Bring a snack. Jazz peeked out at the piglet, who was tied to the front porch. I'm still not sure this is a good idea, using Eugenia as bait. Nothing will happen to her, Milo promised. We've been right here watching the whole time. And watching and watching. Somewhere nearby, a door slammed. A minute later, Mrs. Budge came up the front walk. At last, she was carrying a paper bag with leaves sticking out the top. Milo sucked in his breath. Could it be Olinda? All he could see now were her legs. Suddenly, the piglet dashed forward. Mrs. Budge shrieked. The bag dropped to the ground. The piglet happily dove at the leaves. Jazz gasped. Then, before they could move from their hiding spot, a hand reached down and snatched the bag away. No, no, said Mrs. Budge. That's not for you. You may be a pest, but I don't want you getting sick. Rap, rap, rap. Mrs. Budge was knocking on Jazz's front door. A second later it opened. I brought you some mint from my garden, Mrs. Budge said. Oh, thank you, said Jazz's mom. I love mint in my iced tea. Come on inside. The door clicked shut. I knew it wasn't her, Jazz whispered. They settled in to wait some more. The minutes dragged. Milo's stomach growled. He stared at Ethan's chocolate bunny until Ethan got nervous and stuffed it in his shirt. Maybe Jazz was right. Maybe this stakeout wasn't such a good idea. Then Gordy came down the street. When he got to Jazz's house, he stopped and glanced around nervously. Then he dashed up the walk, squatted down, and reached toward Eugenia. What's he doing? Jazz hissed. Milo peered out. He's petting her. Then Gordy spoke. Who's a weedle bacon bits, he said. Who's an itsy bitsy piggy wiggy? Milo and Jazz stared at each other. Gordy? Talking baby? Talk to a pig? Milo bit his cheek and clamped his hand over his mouth. He looked away from Jazz, who was doing the same thing, but it was no use. Their eyes met and exploded in laughter. As the two detectives fell out of the bushes, Gordy jumped to his feet. His face brick red, he turned and ran. Itsy bitsy, Milo choked out. Jazz gasped, Whittle piggy wiggy. Oh my gosh, that's so funny. When they finally stopped laughing, Milo's stomach started growling again. They left Ethan and the piglet on the porch and went in for a snack. While Jazz raided the refrigerator, Milo opened his notebook and stared at their short list of suspects. Gordy, Mrs. Budge. Jazz glanced over his shoulder. We know it wasn't Mrs. Budge. We heard her say right out that she didn't want Eugenia getting sick. And it couldn't have been Gordy either, said Milo. He'd never let Whittle Bacon Bitsy eat anything icky. He crossed off Gordy. He crossed off Mrs. Budge. So much for our list, Milo said. Maybe we're looking at this wrong, said Jazz. What do you mean? Well, Dash said to look for a pattern. That means something that's the same each time. Maybe what we need to do is write down everything we know about the 2 times Eugenia was poisoned. She grabbed the notebook and wrote. First time, where? Kitchen. When? BPP. Second time, where? Yard. When? APP. So now that the suspects are crossed out, Gordy and Mrs. Budge, who do you think poisoned the pig? Or why do you think the pig is getting sick? Let's keep reading. What's BPP and APP? Milo asked. Before pig-proofing and after pig-proofing, of course. Jazz tapped the pen. What else? He shrugged. The puke looked pretty much the same both times, kind of brown and... Got it, thanks. Jazz made a face. How about people? Gordy was around, Mrs. Budge, and us. It wasn't Gordy, and it wasn't Mrs. Budge, and it sure wasn't us. Now what? No one else was there both times, except for Ethan. Milo looked at Jazz. Jazz looked at Milo. Ethan, they yelled. When he came inside, Jazz asked, Ethan, are you sure you didn't give Eugenia anything bad to eat? He shook his head. Nothing at all. I told you. I just gave her kisses. Huge loves kisses. Milo rolled his eyes. Ethan, but they're all gone now, his brother went on. That's why I brung the bunny. I bet she loves bunnies, too. Wait a minute. Bunnies, kisses, and a poison pig. Ethan, do you mean chocolate kisses? Ethan nodded happily. Then he reached in his pocket and dug out a big handful of crumpled pink and green foil wrappers. For my Easter basket, I let Huge have all my kisses. They're her favorite. Milo sat on the porch steps watching. Chapter 10. Milo sat on the porch steps watching Ethan and the piglet chase each other around the front yard. Jazz was copying out the letter to Dash Marlowe in invisible ink on a purple pad. They told him all about how they had solved the case of the poisoned pig. I still can't believe your little brother was the poisoner, she said. He didn't mean to hurt her. He just wanted to give her the nicest thing he had, and that was chocolate. He loves that pig. Jazz smiled. I know, but if we hadn't caught him in time, he might have loved her to death. You know what I can't believe? What? Jazz said. Ethan gave Eugenia a ton of Easter candy, and he wouldn't give me any, not one tiny bite. Me, his own brother. Jazz laughed. Then she said, by the way, her name isn't Eugenia. It's not? How come? Did Queenie win? What do you think the pig's name is going to be? Do you think it's going to be any of the children's answers? So like Eugenia, Queenie, Spike, Pegasus, Bacon Bits from Gordy, that's his nickname. Yeah, who do you think the options are? What did Ethan, do you remember what Ethan named the piglet? Okay, let's see on the next page. Yuck, no. Spike? Pegasus? She shook her head. We picked a new name. Actually, it was Gordy's idea. Not Bacon Bits. Not exactly. Jazz waved an arm at the pig. May I present Bitsy? Bitsy, Milo said. That's a pretty good name for a mini pig. Though she can sure cause mega trouble. Well, the trouble is all over, Jazz said. Ethan won't give her chocolate anymore, and we don't have to worry about her getting into Mrs. Budge's garden. Milo looked at the new fence guarding the freshly replanted flower bed. I feel so silly for suspecting Mrs. Budge, he said. All her talk of taking care of the pig problem, and she just meant putting up a fence. Jazz said, yeah, but you... Her next words were drowned out by a roar. A moment later, Dylan's car nosed slowly down the driveway. Grinning, he leaned out the open window. Hey, kids, want a ride? Wow, you got it running, Milo said. Don't look so shocked. He patted the side. This baby's going places. As the car eased forward, Bitsy the piglet dashed across the lawn toward the driveway. Dylan, Jazz yelled, watch out. Startled, Dylan swung the steering wheel. The car veered away from Bitsy and into the new fence. The car stopped with its two front tires planted smack in Mrs. Budge's flower bed. Milo and Jazz stared. What was that you said about trouble being over? Milo asked. Jazz shook her head slowly. Then she said, you know how Dash says to look for a pattern? Yeah, I think I see one now, Milo said. You mean about how Mrs. Budge's flowers keep getting smushed? No, Jazz said. I mean about how two things always seem to go together, trouble and us. Oh no. I bet Mrs. Budge is going to be super mad about the flower bed being ruined. Okay, so we just finished the book. These are just some other pages afterwards. So go ahead, look at the description, look at the questions, and look at the vocabulary words. I want you to define the vocabulary words and answer the questions. Post it in your portfolio in Classroom Dojo, and I will take a look at it, and yeah, I want to hear your responses. So have a great day. Bye, guys.